Welcome to the Limitless Entrepreneur Podcast, your weekly dose of strategies and mindset tools to build a business in alignment with your purpose and to get you playing a bigger game. I'm your host, Nicole Lano. Hello, and welcome to the Limitless Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Lano, and I'm here with a guest today. Miss Hope Pedraza is with us. She's a certified holistic nutritionist, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and host of Hopeful and Wholesome podcast. Hope helps career-driven women to heal their gut, balance their minds, and feel good in their bodies again. Hope is also a mom, a serial entrepreneur, and the founder of a Pilates-based franchise in Balance Studio. Hi, how are you, Hope?
Hi,
Welcome to the show.
Good. Thanks for having me, Nicole.
What did I always say, like I was saying before we started, 2 sentences hardly sums up a person. So what did I miss in that bio? Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah. I mean, I think you pretty much hit all the main topics, but yeah, I am an MFDNP. I'm a holistic nutritionist, and I just help women heal their bodies. I started out, so you mentioned my Pilates studio. That's kind of where I started out. My background was in dance, and I was a dancer for 20 some odd years of my life, got into Pilates, and then from Pilates kind of just expanded into just kind of wellness in general. And so now I have to kind of have the best of both worlds. I have my brick and mortar, and then I get my online business where I get to help people from all over the world. So it's pretty cool.
Beautiful. Are you a 2-4?
3-5.
3-5. Okay. So we're going to talk today about human design, about health, and really how we were talking earlier about like eating habits and how human design can actually inform us about our health. And I would love to, that's totally I love this because I'm immersed completely in human design, but this is a step to the side of an area that I haven't delved into, other than understanding some of the digestion and things in our chart, but putting it into specific practice. I'm excited to have this little convo today.
Yeah, me too.
So how do you approach, well, first of all, what is your design? So everybody knows. I think that it helps sometimes to understand when you're hearing somebody, how are they like, oh, that's like me.
Yeah, for sure. So I am a manifesting generator, and I'm a 3-5 with a sacral authority.
Okay. So you're, and tell us how you use human design. How did you come across human design and decide to like, I'm going to use this in my practice?
Yeah. So I found it a few years ago. I was doing some work with a spiritual business coach, and it was kind of like this little bitty piece. She wasn't like a human design expert per se, but it was like this little piece of her course that just kind of helped me dip my toe in the water. And, I did my chart or whatever. And I just basically just learned, what I was, a type and all that. And she didn't go into detail, but I'm like, this is completely fascinating. Like I just immediately just started going down the rabbit holes. And so I just kept reading about it and learning more about it. And I found another girl online who I feel like we're like kindred spirits on, because I've done all these programs with her, but she did a couple readings for me and helped me learn more about it and more about me. And it was when I did those readings with her that I was like, holy cow, like this is nuts. And it's like we were talking before we hit record. It's like, how do you know everything about me? Like you're reading my human design. And I know it sounds so cheesy, and I've said this so many times before, but I felt like I was meeting myself for the first time, but then B, I was meeting an old friend. Like I knew that person because it's me, but then, there's so much of this shadow stuff that we try to hide, and we feel like, we need to change or whatever, or feel bad about like how we are. And it's like, no, like this is me, like this is how it was designed. And I just found it totally validating and liberating and just mind blowing, like all at the same time. And so I was able to, it literally transformed how, like my relationship with myself, my relationship with my business, and my relationship with like other people, how I looked at other people. It just changed everything. And so as I started implementing it into my own life and like diving deeper, and I decided to like, take a course on it, that kind of thing, I felt like this was a perfect thing to add to what I was doing with my clients in my functional nutrition practice. When we talk about functional nutrition, we're talking about dealing with the body from like a holistic perspective, right? And it's the mind, it's the body, it's the soul. Like you can't treat one without the other. Like you cannot separate them. And I felt like this human design piece was like this soul piece that's missing from the functional nutrition piece. And, why not help people understand themselves better? Why not help people maybe learn about themselves for the first time? And why not help it's an awareness tool, right? It's like just building more awareness. And I'm huge on like self-awareness and body awareness, all of that, because you obviously can't change what you're not aware of, right? And it goes with, nutrition and wellness, but it goes with that part too, with like this soul spirit piece. It's like, you don't understand how things work until you understand how you were designed, And so I wanted to be able to integrate all of that with, obviously the nutrition piece. I'm helping women. I work with women who have chronic issues, whether it's gut, hormone, thyroid, autoimmune, but having this piece where they can also understand themselves better and understand how they work, why they work the way they do, and help them implement that into like their wellness practices.
Yeah. And as you were explaining that and kind of running through it, I kept coming back to when you talked about, like, when you mentioned autoimmune at the end, stress is such a contributing factor to conditions like that. And one of the stresses that we have is trying to figure ourselves out. Why do I do this? Why is this like this? Why is that like that? So there is something just to getting your chart read and understanding you on a deeper level that calms you down.
Totally.
And it gives you permission to kind of look at it and be like, oh, that's just the way I am.
100%.
And that's just the way they are.
Yep. Exactly.
My husband told me the other day, we were talking about, because he's oddly interested in this. He's never been interested in anything I've done before, but he's like, this one makes sense. And I was like, that's shocking to me that you think that, because you're so not the person I thought. Like, I'm like, because it's pretty out there for,
sure.
And he said, he was like, it's softened you. Like, understanding human design has softened you with other people, meaning it's made me more accepting of others because I've been more accepting of myself and recognizing that, like, oh, that's just the way I'm built. That's just the way you're built. And it's freaky when you read someone's chart and a trait that you always knew was there. And then you look at it and you're like, oh no, it's actually there.
Yeah.
Oh, look, and it's conscious and unconscious. And that's why it's so strong. And there's crazy stuff in there. So I understand that was just one of the things that jumped out at me, that just the stress level of like the comfort level that you have with yourself and with the world is deepened with human design.
For sure. Well, and that's really the lens that I see, like when we're looking at wellness through the lens of human design. I think that's exactly what it is. It's like, many of us spend the majority of our lives, living with the shoulds, right? How we should do this, how I should do that, how I should do this. And, whether it's conditioning or societal pressures or, our family or whatever it is that's made us think that we need to live by these shoulds, that's what creates resistance, because we're living against our design. Like we're living the opposite of how we were designed. And that literally causes stress in the body, like you're talking about. I mean, you're living with this resistance and you're expending this excessive amount of energy being something that you were not designed to be, doing things that you were not designed to do. So of course it's going to, it's going to lead to burnout and exhaustion and immune issues and all these other things in the body, because you're literally going the opposite direction of what your design is, so I feel like that's exactly what it is. It's being able to let go of that stress of living with the shoulds and just living as, in alignment with how we were truly designed to be, and living with like ease and flow.
Yeah. And I love that. So talk to me a little bit about how you work with it. When someone's coming to you for a health issue, what are you taking into account? And I get the sense that you do work with some entrepreneurs, people who are more business focused. So how are you taking these two things because entrepreneurs generally are pretty interested in, like, how do I do more? How do I perform better? Like, we're performance focused. So how are you, what's the approach that you take to viewing performance through the lens of health and then layering human design onto that?
Yeah. The biggest thing for me, and I keep it pretty, depending on the person, because some people want to go deep, but I keep it pretty like bird's eye view for them. And for me, the most important thing is for them is understanding their type, their authority, a couple of the centers, defined versus undefined, and just kind of the main parts there, because understanding their type is really first and foremost, because that's going to help me explain to them like what their best, sleep habits patterns should be, and how they best eat, and how they best, work out, and how to choose the best, and that also helps me to kind of figure out their protocol too. Like, for example, I'm using me as an example because I'm a manifesting generator. We don't exactly like being put in a box. We don't exactly like being restricted by things. And so giving a manifesting generator like a really structured eat this, eat this, eat this, like it's not going to work. So being able to, have some creativity with that and some fluidity with people like that, like manifesting generators and generators, that there's some more like freedom building in some more freedom there. And then things like sleep, like taking reflector as an example, knowing that they're so sensitive to the energy around them that they're taking in all day, having them build time at the end of the day to kind of decompress and separate themselves from the energy of the day before they go to sleep. Otherwise, we're going to talk about sleep issues a lot. Like our conversations are going to be talking a lot about sleep because they haven't given themselves that time and that space to kind of like discharge from the day. So using just examples like that of understanding what your type is, how it works, how it interacts with other people, and kind of planning our, nutrition, the movement, exercise piece, the sleep piece, the stress management piece, like all those pieces together.
And you mentioned centers. Are there particular centers that you focus on, whether they are defined or undefined? Are there things within the chart that you're looking at for people? So we've got type and I understand, like maybe let's back up a little bit. If you went through each of the types, what are some of the things that you highlight? You mentioned manifesting generators. We're not going to stress them out by telling them that they have to do something one way, because that might work for like a couple of days. They're really excited about it. And they're like,
and then they're not,
screw this mess. I'm not, you can't hold me down.
Exactly.
And then they're like, I'm such a failure because I can't stick to anything. Everyone tells me what a flake I am.
Yes.
But so we mentioned manifesting generators, you mentioned reflectors with the sleep schedule and making sure that they are giving themselves some time to, and what we're talking about there is giving them time with all of their openness. You're taking in all that information from other people, all of that energy from other people all day, every day, that you're giving yourself time by yourself to shed that. And clean that out.
Exactly.
And you'll do that mostly when you sleep, but if you leave it all to sleep, you'll have crummy sleep.
Totally. 100%.
Like that, just to give anybody, we haven't talked a ton about reflectors on this show. And I found out my best friend from high school is a reflector.
Oh, nice.
And so much made
Explains
sense.
so much.
When she said that, she just called me and she was like, I found out I'm a reflector. That's what you do, right? Human design. I was like, oh, we need to talk,
awesome.
girl.
Right.
So manifesting generators, reflectors. Now let's go through the other three types and just see what else jumps out that someone can take away.
So let's see, let's say generators. So generators, they're here to do what lights them up, what brings them pleasure and joy in the moment. And I find that's really helpful when talking about food and exercise too. Again, going back to that, like living by the shoulds, right? And you think, well, I should be running because that's going to make me lose weight, but they hate running. Well, then don't run. Like find something else that's fun to do. Like and same with food. I don't really want to eat keto, but I should eat keto because it's going to make me lose weight. Then don't eat keto, right? Like, so
should is the operative word here.
Exactly. That's exactly
Shoulds are kryptonite to the generator family.
So it is. It's exactly it. Yes. So, eating what excites you, doing the exercise, the movement that excites you, just keeping that like fun and pleasure, like in everything that you do, is really important for generators. And then with generators and manifesting generators, we've got a lot of energy. And I always like compare it to like a puppy. Like you have to let the puppy run out in the yard for a while, let it get all its energy out. Like we have to do the same thing. And I find that can also affect their sleep. Both generators and manifesting generators, not getting out all the energy. Like, did you move enough today? Did you get everything out of your head that needed to get out of your head? That kind of thing.
Because then you're not exhausted at the end of the day, which is how generators are supposed to sleep. We're supposed to run the battery out.
Exactly. Run it out.
And then collapse. And then wake up the next day and you feel like $1 million.
Yeah, that's it. You start over. That's exactly it. And then the opposite is true with manifestors, right? And I find there's some conditioning a lot of times, or deconditioning that takes place with manifestors, especially if they're working around generators and manifesting generators, or they're in a relationship with a generator and manifesting generator. is they feel that pressure to like keep going till exhaustion. Manifestors are not meant to do that. Like manifestors are meant before, like to stop before they get to that exhaustion piece. And I find a lot of times that burnout it's just that pressure to, I need to keep going, but no, like you're not meant to do that. Like you don't have the energy that an MG has. So understanding like where, like setting boundaries, understanding like where their limits are for manifestors, and kind of bringing in that intuitive piece to it, and understanding that, their energy type is going to be completely different than other energy types. And really, I think when they do feel that exhaustion, that's a good sign to like, kind of, let's figure out where things are out of alignment here. Like, let's figure out where I'm wasting my energy, where I'm spending, energy in places maybe I shouldn't. And then kind of moving with their, like the energetic waves that they have too, and kind of bringing an intuitive piece into it that way, where, manifestors, they have these like action phases where they're doing things, right? And they have these rest phases, and bringing in that intuitive piece to those phases where their energy kind of fluctuates, and knowing that, when they're in these action phases, maybe they do eat more, calorie dense foods. Maybe they're doing more high intensity exercise, but when there's this resting phase, we need to shift that and really like honor the energy where they are in those resting phases.
And then we have projectors.
Yes, projectors. So for projectors, this one I think is interesting because it's like kind of the opposite of what I was saying about manifesting generators. I find that projectors can do really well with like a structured way of eating. And I don't want to say restrictive because I'm not a fan of restrictive anything, but they do well with structured ways of eating because it's less thought and energy they have to put into it, right? And so, eating the Mediterranean diet or eating paleo, like things like that, like they do well eating in kind of more structured ways. And I find they can really thrive doing it that way. And then again, talking about honoring your like energetic waves, right? Same, projectors they're not meant to work all day long. Like me and my husband were talking about this the other day because my son is a projector. And so where I was talking about his energy and stuff, and he was like, well, what about projectors that have a 9-to-5 job? I'm like, that's like a nightmare for a projector. Like a lot of projectors burn out because it's just not how they were designed to work, unless they're able to take breaks and stuff throughout the day. But bringing that into, your everyday life too, where it's like, okay, let's like turn the battery off, take a break, and then you can recharge and then keep going, rather than just trying to push through the day and get through the 8-9 hour workday or whatever. So honoring those, again, like knowing that, and even at night too, I find projectors just require more sleep. Like they just need more rest, and just being able to honor that.
And now we'll get to where I backed up from, where I was like, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me pull back. You mentioned centers. Are there specific things in the chart beyond type that you're looking for, or that you've noticed after working for somebody that you've kind of backed into it, that like, oh, I see this correlation between like immediately my mind goes to the spleen. Is there something with the spleen where people who have an undefined spleen, like, tell me what have you discovered through your work?
Yeah. So I find the ego center, I find is important. That center of like willpower. I find that one comes up a lot, and being able to totally, and being able to explain that to people, like, why do I not have any willpower? Well, it's literally not there for you. Like,
you do. It's just not going to be there all the time when you need it.
Exactly.
The opposite of what we're taught.
Exactly. So helping people understand themselves in that sense, I find that center pops up a lot. The spleen, for sure. I find the spleen, it's that center for intuition, which is a big piece of all of this. And that's one thing that I'm always encouraging my clients, is really like being able to tune into that intuitive, just in general, but especially when it comes to their wellness, and being able to tune into that intuitive piece. But the splenic center also deals with your immune system and health and intuition, all those things. So it is important in helping people understand, looking at I don't talk a lot about gates, and I'm not an expert on all of the gates, but I do like to look at the splenic gates and look kind of at those fears that come up, on a consistent basis, and helping people kind of work through those and understand where those are coming from and how to kind of, shift those. And then I do like the emotional center. I find there's a correlation there to our detox organs. And I find that there's no coincidence there. I find that, as you know, there's a lot that goes on in this center, a lot that doesn't get processed in this center. And that leads to a lot of things. I mean, emotions are literally chemicals in the body. They're literally chemicals stored in the body. And when they don't get managed and dealt with, and they're just stuck, it's just stuck. And then that's what turns, it turns just toxicity in the body. And so I find that there's no coincidence that particular center is associated with those detox organs like your kidneys and your bladder and your pancreas and those things, that it really does. I find that there's a lot that needs to be dealt with, which is why, part of my program, I have a friend of mine, and she does, NLP, and she does EFT, and so I bring in a lot of that too, for them to be able to help like work through that emotional piece too, because it's a huge thing. And I find too, when I first meet with clients, and I have a lot of questions about, have you had, trauma in your life? Have you had traumatic events, emotional, all this stuff. And a lot of times they kind of like brush over it or graze over it. And then the more we work together, I end up finding out like, oh, I had this like crazy, terrible eating disorder for 10 years of my life. And I'm like, no wonder your body is a hot mess. Like, we've never dealt with this. We're not even talking about it. But, that center, I feel like, is such an important center, just working through so many things there from that center, that's an important one to hone in on.
No, I love that. And I love, and that's the thing about like human design. People say like, what's the most important thing? It depends on the chart, depends on the person, depends on their history.
Totally.
But what's so beautiful about it is you do have a map. There is something that you can work with. There is something where you could say like, oh, well, you feel paralyzed by fear. Let's take a look at the ways that fear might be showing up for you. And there's something that's automatically relaxing, that when you go through the fear gates, which I have tons of them active, like my whole spleen almost is lit up. And I'm just like, no wonder I deal with this all the time. But you can go through those fear gates and you can say like, oh, it's like, I have the fear of the future and the fear of the past repeating itself. Those two things. And you combine that with some of the other energies in my chart. And I'm like, oh, I could see why these are things that lock me up. But immediately though, in knowing that, it changes my relationship to that fear, where it's like, this is just a firing of an energy within me. It's not actually based on anything. It's just happening. Just like if you're emotionally defined, emotions are just happening. There doesn't have to be something external that causes you to be emotional. You're just, I was emotional yesterday. I have no reason why. Everything was fine. It was a great day. But I was just like, I don't know, I'm a little funky. Luckily, my funks don't go down very far anymore because I've raised that baseline. Right. But I still notice it. I still like, I can tell there's a difference between that and when I'm like riding high. But that's, like you said, it's a chemical process. It's just something that's happening, and that changes your whole relationship to it, where you're not trying to make sense of it. You're not trying to get rid of it, because you won't. It's going to be there. You're stuck with it. So get cozy and start to build a friendship with it to some degree.
Well, and I love what you said about like that baseline, because I think that's the other important thing is, under using this as an awareness tool and understanding yourself. And then I kind of use that. I do a lot with like stress management and nervous system regulation and all of that. And I think the human design is such a huge piece of that, again, because you're understanding yourself. So you're able to, like you're saying, kind of manage things a little differently, but that's what it's all about. It's just building that, it's like raising that baseline. It's just building resiliency in the body so that you're raising that baseline. So you don't have to, hit rock bottom and then work your way back up anymore. Like, your emotions are going to fluctuate. Your stress is going to fluctuate, but it's just building that higher baseline so that you're able to keep yourself in a more regulated state to keep you out of that exhaustion state, that stress state.
Exactly. Like, your emotional wave, like that's going to happen, and it's going to have this kind of predetermined path that it's going to take you on. The roller coaster ride isn't going to change. But what will change is the roller coaster ride on solid ground, where you're just experiencing different levels of air and height above the ground? Or is it underwater, where you are, when you go through the lows, you're suddenly drowning? And then there's only moments where you come above that and you lower the water level as you empty the emotional cup.
Totally.
And you go through, like, I use EFT for that with my work. It's about, let's clear the slate. Let's empty the cup to give you greater capacity.
Yep.
Then if something hits you, you suddenly go into an emotional state for no reason. It might only fill the cup like a tiny little bit where you almost don't even notice it.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You just know you're walking around with a little extra weight
Yeah.
that day.
Right.
That's
Feel
it.
a little off. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so how does this relate to people's businesses? So just wanting to tie that in a little bit here of particularly not just human design, but overall health, your health. Why? Because I do think that entrepreneurs we're so driven sometimes, whether we should be or not, but we're so ambitious and looking at the goal that we forget to look and say, am I taking care of me?
Yep.
And I've noticed that the more I take care of me and really make me a priority, my health and my body, just the more vibrant I am, the more able I am to perform at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you see with people, and what is I know you work a lot with gut health, and how do you see body consciousness and health awareness playing out for entrepreneurs?
Yeah. Well, it's like you said, I mean, when you take care of you, you have more of you to give, right? You have more of you to perform. You have more of you to give to your team or your family or whoever. And that's really what it is. I mean, I work with some entrepreneurs and then a lot of just professionals. Like I work with women, so they're professionals, they're entrepreneurs, and they're all very driven, and they're all, have goals, and they also have, families, and they have a bunch of stuff going on. And for most of them, they're talking about living by the shoulds. They've always put themselves, at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of taking care. And then they get to the point where they've reached the rock bottom, and then they're like, well, now I have no choice but to take care of myself. And so I think that it's the perspective shift is putting yourself first, which I know for women is hard to put yourself first, but that really is the perspective shift. It's understanding that the reason you're putting yourself first is because, and I hate that whole cliche thing about the oxygen mask in the airplane thing, but it really is true. Like, it really is true. Like, you really can't take care of anybody else. You can't give any more of yourself when you're not taking care of yourself. So I think it's understanding the long-term implications of not taking care of yourself, the long-term implications of just putting your health on the back burner. And at some point you're going to have to deal with it, whether it's now or later. Like, at some point you're going to have to deal with it. And I think that, with entrepreneurs, we're so focused on, like you're saying, performance, right? And the goal of our business, whether it's a monetary goal or it's the growth goal or whatever. But there's literally no way you're going to hit any of your goals if your health goes down the pooper. Like, there's no way for you to do that when your adrenals are shot, when you're getting sick all the time because your immune system is shot, when your gut's out of whack. You don't have enough energy to give of yourself. You don't have any more of yourself to give. And it goes back to what I was saying before about kind of looking at wellness through the lens of human design. Like, you're spending all this excessive amount of energy forcing and pushing, when if you were just to kind of step back and build like this vessel up and, into like a more vibrant, building more vitality, then that's how you get to point B. That's how you get to, accomplish those performance goals. It's taking care of the vessel that's getting you there.
And do you find that human design, even just because I find this, but I'm curious if in your work with people coming to you specifically for health help, assistance and support in that realm, do you find that even just following strategy and authority, that focusing on the soul, focusing on the energetic side, sort of slows them down naturally enough to pay attention to, like, it's a grounding sort of practice and expanding as well? Do you find that with people that it's by giving them this strategy to follow that it causes them to not just move in perpetual motion?
Totally. Absolutely. I mean, and really, and that's what I was saying at the beginning, like, I really take a pretty like basic look at it when I'm using it with my clients, because I really think the strategy, the authority, and your type, like, this almost all you need, like, to get yourself going with this. And I did an interview a few weeks ago, and she asked me, like, what do you think the most important piece of the chart is, which is a really hard question to answer. But I loved that question because it does, it totally does. And I said, if I had to pick one, I'm going to say your strategy or your not self theme, because that's really, like you're saying, I think that's what keeps you in check. Like for me, do I feel frustration? Okay, something's off. Like, let me figure out what's out of alignment here. Like that's the only thing I need to know. If I'm frustrated, okay, let me take a step back. And that's one of the pieces I hone in on with my clients, is that not self theme and the strategy, understanding that that's the only sign you need to know that you're out of alignment. Like, because they're like, well, how do I know if this center's out of alignment, this center's out of alignment? That's the only thing you need to know. Are you angry? Are you bitter? Are you frustrated? Like, that's all you need to know. And that's the only, and like you're saying, it does make you kind of step back and slow down and figure out, okay, let's reassess the situation and see how I can shift that and get out of that, that not self-name of frustration, whatever it is. But it really is. And I had my client the other day, she sent me a message and she told me that she's like, I am finally understanding how to implement my human design that you've talked about it. She was like, I realized, she's a manifesting generator as well. I was frustrated the other day, and she told me it's a whole long story, but it's like it clicked.
Yeah.
And she's like, I was able to recognize what the trigger was and be able to reconfigure the situation kind of thing. But it really does. It makes you kind of stop and stand back and look at things a little different.
Yeah. And that frustration, the not self theme is such an incredible tool, because it's so simple, and people can discount these things because they're simple. And it's like, it should be bigger. It should be more complicated. Yes. Trust me, the chart's plenty complicated. So to take the fact that at least the strategy and authority thing is pretty straightforward, that knowing you're not self theme, the frustration piece, or the anger piece, or depending on your type, you have a different not self theme, but it is the flag. There's something about, like, I could tell you that you're meant to be happy. We're all meant to be happy. That if something is wrong, that if you're not happy in your life, then something is wrong. And we could throw away that piece of advice because it sounds so simplistic and kumbaya that we're just like, yeah, whatever, hippie. Get out of here. But then when we get specific about it and show you that, well, frustration is the stop sign. That is the signal to you to say your specific one of how misalignment shows up for you. And all you got to do is pause.
Yep.
All you got to do is pause and inquire. Pause and take a look. Observe. What am I doing? What feels wrong to me that I'm doing that I ultimately know I shouldn't be doing? It doesn't feel good to me. What a gift you give to yourself by even asking that question, rather than just continually moving in that direction. And this is how the work, if you just start there, it can have these profound effects on your life, just by making these tiny steps into alignment, to just pause. When we say, like, the pause, we're giving you the exact space to pause. When this happens, pause, ask, observe.
Yep.
So I love this. And I love the work that you do. I love how, because I'm always interested in hearing how human design is being used in people's businesses and people's lives, because there are endless applications for it. It's such a beautiful system, and gives you this gorgeous map for life that just keeps unfolding and unfolding and unfolding in the most magical ways. So I appreciate you being here to share your perspective and your wisdom on this. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for letting me share.
Please tell everybody where they can learn more about you, follow you, hear more about what you do. Where can they get more of Hope?
Yeah, I am probably most active on Instagram. I'm at the Hope Pedraza. I have a free Facebook group. It's called Live Wholesome and Healthy, and it's just all things functional nutrition, functional wellness, and a little bit of human design sprinkled in. And then I have a podcast, it's Hopeful and Wholesome. You can check me out there.
Beautiful. And we will link all that up in the show notes for you. So we got you covered there. Hope, thank you for being here with us. And thank you for being a part of this conversation, listener. We appreciate you. We literally wouldn't be here without you. So thank you. Thank you for making it to the end of this conversation and being a part of it. And remember, you're only limited by the limitations that you accept. And when you stop accepting those limitations, that is when you become limitless. So go out there and be limitless, my people. I will see you next time. If you loved this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you want to stay in touch with us, we would love to have you as a part of our Facebook community, Practical Manifestors. It's a community for process-driven women looking for clear and actionable steps to embodying a life of wealth and alignment. Join us at Practical Manifestors in Facebook or go to www.innerceogroup.com.